Welcome back to another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Great news for you. You're here. If you're watching this, you made it another day. Congratulations. You woke up. It's a good day to serve God. Today we're going through Isaiah chapter 54 through 58. And tomorrow we're going to do Isaiah 59 to 63. So I'm just going to point out a few things that stood out to me in each chapter. Verse 13 in chapter 54 stood out to me. It says, "Then all your children will be taught by the Lord, their prosperity will be great." Of course, I got a different version on the screen here. King James says, "And all thy children shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of thy children." Now, the reason why this is important to me and it sticks out is because Jesus actually quoted this verse in John chapter 6, verse 45. Now, chapter 55, verses 8 and 9 stuck out. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, either are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." That is transcendent, or transcendence. Now, God's transcendence, this is a Christian concept of transcendence. It refers to the fact that God is distinct from and independent of his created world. He is transcendent over us in regards to his greatness and power, as well as his goodness and purity. Now, the implication of this doctrine is that God is inherently superior to humanity. His thoughts and ways are higher than ours. When God saves us, he restores us so we can fulfill our human purpose. This does not mean that we become God or that distinctions between God and humanity become obliterated. Instead, understanding God's transcendence evokes awe and wonder at his goodness and power. Now, in chapter 56, what stood out to me the most was verse 7, actually verse 3 through 7 to be more specific, because in verse 3 and 4 and also on through verse 7, it talks about people and worship, people who are included and excluded in worship previously and who should be included. And it says here, God basically reminds his people that foreigners who convert to the Lord are not to be excluded from worship. So if you're not a Christian and you become a Christian, you should never exclude those people from worship just because they may be different from us. And that's eunuchs included here. It specifically points out eunuchs. It is referring to everyone, not just eunuchs and not just foreign, but everyone. Eunuchs were typically excluded from worship according to Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 1. However, this verse here in verse 4 describes that an obedient eunuch, and thus one who has become a eunuch accidentally or has converted to worship of God after becoming a eunuch, they can come and worship. Such devout eunuchs were actually invited to join in the worship of God. And in verse 7, God's house, the temple, will become a place where everyone can come to pray. And this verse is quoted over and over in the New Testament. Matthew 21 verse 13, Mark chapter 11 verse 17, and Luke chapter 19 verse 46. In other words, all are welcome in God's house. As long as, and it does point that out, as long as either you're converted or you're not practicing those sins and you're aware that you need to follow God's word. Here we go. We're going to go on to chapter 57. Now, verse 1 and 2 stood out to me, and it says here, "The righteous person perishes, and no one takes it to heart. The faithful are taken away, and no one realizing that the righteous person is taken away because of evil. He will enter into peace. They will rest on their beds, everyone who lives uprightly." Now, it says in some versions that they are taken away to be spared from evil. In other words, death is not necessarily a punishment. Death is actually pulling you away from evil. It's taking you to a better place. If you are righteous, you're going to a better place where evil can't get you. It can't get to you. And it kind of alludes to that, the fact that retribution is not always able to happen in this lifetime. So, but verse 2 here, it hints at that future resolution of the problem when it talks about death for the righteous as an entering into peace, as opposed to a punishment for something that you did wrong. It's not. You're entering into peace if you're righteous. And then verses 14 through 21, this is all about peace and healing. And I think our country, us as individuals, every one of us needs this right now. Verses 14 through 21 kind of reverse the proportions of the previous section, verses 3 through 13, which talked all about the negatives. This section here is a very long statement about God's good intentions towards the righteous, and with a brief statement about the fate of the wicked at the end. So it's mostly focusing on peace and healing. And last but not least, chapter 58, you will rebuild the ancient ruins, raise foundations from ages past, and be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets to live in. Isaiah 58, verse 12. Now, why in the world did I put that up there? Well, I put it up there for historical purposes because Bill Clinton placed his hand on Isaiah 58, verse 12, as he took the presidential oath of office in 1997. Now, whether or not you think he fulfilled that verse or not, that's up to you to decide. And I hope to see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Click that like button, that subscribe button, that follow button, and of course hit the little boxing glove so you can rumble with me on Rumble. And of course, set your notifications so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow. We'll see you then.